Hello, and welcome to our comprehensive video on World War II, a conflict so vast that it shaped the modern world like no other. Lasting from 1939 to 1945, this war involved more than 100 million people from over 30 countries, bridging every inhabited continent and culminating in unparalleled devastation. If you want to understand the roots of the war, the major powers involved, the pivotal battles, and the sweeping consequences that continue to influence global affairs, you're in the right place. Please give this video a like. Leave a comment about which aspect of World War II fascinates you the most, and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into momentous historical events. Let's begin our journey into the causes, course, and impact of the world's deadliest conflict. Background and roots of conflict. World War I. Aftermath and the Treaty of Versailles, the First World War, 1914-1918, ended with the signing of the Treaty of Versailles, 1919, which placed the responsibility for the war squarely on Germany. The treaty imposed severe reparations, territorial losses, and restrictions on Germany's military. Many Germans viewed these terms as humiliating. The Weimar Republic, the new German democratic government, was forced to shoulder colossal economic burdens and territorial diminutions, loss of Alsace-Lorraine to France, the Polish corridor, colonies, etc. Concurrently, the Austro-Hungarian Empire disintegrated into several new states. In Eastern Europe, a patchwork of small or newly independent nations emerged: Poland, Czechoslovakia, the Baltic states, etc., facing ethnic tension and economic fragility. Russian territory, meanwhile, was undergoing a revolution that produced the Soviet Union, 1922, a communist state determined to spread its ideology and secure its borders. The Great Depression and rise of extremism. The Great Depression, starting with the 1929 Wall Street crash, dramatically worsened political and economic instability. Unemployment soared across Europe and North America, wiping out savings and fueling public anger. This turmoil created fertile ground for extremist movements that promised radical solutions. In Germany, Adolf Hitler and his National Socialist German Workers' Party, NSDAP, exploited resentment over Versailles and the mass joblessness, pledging to abolish reparation payments, revive the economy, and restore German power. In Italy, Benito Mussolini had already established a fascist dictatorship from 1922. The Soviet Union, under Joseph Stalin, pursued brutal internal purges while modernizing industry. In Japan, an increasingly militaristic government sought to expand onto mainland Asia to secure resources. Failures of the League of Nations and appeasement. The League of Nations, formed after World War I to maintain peace, was critically weakened by the refusal of the United States to join and by its limited power to enforce decisions. This shortcoming became visible when Japan invaded Manchuria in 1931, Italy invaded Ethiopia in 1935, and Germany reoccupied the Rhineland in 1936, violations the League either hesitated to confront or simply could not stop effectively. Western democracies, Britain, France, adopted appeasement policies, fearing another devastating conflict. They hoped to satisfy Hitler's demands, particularly those regarding the Treaty of Versailles, in order to avoid war. However, these concessions only emboldened aggressive regimes. The Spanish Civil War, 1936-1939. As a prelude, though not always counted as part of World War II, the Spanish Civil War served as a testing ground for the tactics and weaponry of the Axis powers. General Francisco Franco's nationalist forces received arms and military support from Germany, the Condor Legion, and Italy, while the Soviet Union aided the Republican side. The Luftwaffe used Spain to test blitzkrieg-style air raids, infamously bombing Guernica. This conflict foreshadowed the ideological and military polarization soon to engulf Europe. The outbreak of war, 1939. Nazi-Soviet pact and the invasion of Poland. Adolf Hitler's expansionist ambitions turned squarely toward Poland after he had annexed Austria, Anschluss, March 1938, and occupied the Sudetenland, Munich Agreement, September 1938, then dismantled Czechoslovakia, March 1939. In August 1939, Germany and the Soviet Union shocked the world by signing the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, a non-aggression treaty containing secret protocols to divide Eastern Europe into spheres of influence. On September 1, 1939, Germany invaded Poland using blitzkrieg tactics, lightning warfare characterized by concentrated tank formations and devastating airstrikes. With no illusions of Hitler stopping, Britain and France declared war on Germany on September 3rd, marking the official start of W2 in Europe. Despite these declarations, Poland received little direct military help from the West, and by late September, the Soviet Union attacked Poland from the east, completing its partition. The phony war in the West, despite Britain and France being formally at war with Germany, they did not launch significant land operations in late 1939 or early 1940 on the Western Front. This period, often called the Phony War or Sitzkrieg, saw minimal conflict. Instead, Germany consolidated its gains and prepared for future offensives. Western democracies hoped to strangle Germany economically via a blockade, yet they took no major offensive steps on the ground. Early Axis victories, 1940-1941. Invasion of Denmark and Norway, April 1940. Securing iron ore shipments from neutral Sweden was vital for Germany's war industry. Hitler decided to preempt British designs in Scandinavia by occupying Denmark, capitulating almost immediately, and Norway, where the Norwegian forces, aided by limited Allied contingents, offered more resistance. By June 1940, Norway also fell under German control, providing the Kriegsmarine with bases along the Norwegian coast. Fall of the Low Countries and France, May-June 1940. On May 10, 1940, Germany launched a major Western offensive, rapidly overrunning Luxembourg, the Netherlands, and Belgium. The main thrust skirted the Maginot Line through the Ardennes, terrain deemed difficult for tanks, catching the Allies off guard. The Wehrmacht encircled large Allied formations near Dunkirk. Britain managed to evacuate over 300,000 troops, Operation Dynamo, but left most heavy equipment behind. Paris fell on June 14th, and France capitulated on June 22nd, resulting in the German occupation of northern western regions and the creation of the Vichy regime in the south. The Battle of Britain, summer-fall 1940. With France subdued, Hitler sought to force Britain out of the war by achieving air superiority and planning Operation Sea Lion, an invasion of England. The Luftwaffe bombed British airfields, radar stations, and cities, leading to the intense Battle of Britain. RAF Fighter Command, aided by radar technology and an efficient command system, inflicted heavy losses on the Luftwaffe. By October 1940, Germany canceled the invasion, marking the Nazis' first major defeat. Mediterranean and North Africa fascist Italy, led by Mussolini, entered the war in June 1940, attempting expansions into Egypt, held by Britain and Greece. However, Italian setbacks forced Hitler to send the Afrika Korps, February 1941, under Erwin Rommel. In Greece, German forces intervened, April 1941, conquering Yugoslavia and Greece swiftly. Although these campaigns succeeded tactically, they consumed resources and possibly delayed the planned German invasion of the Soviet Union. Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, June 1941. The largest land invasion in history on June 22, 1941. Disregarding the Non-Aggression Pact, Germany unleashed Operation Barbarossa, a colossal assault on the USSR. Over 3 million Axis troops advanced along an 800-mile front. Initially, the Germans achieved immense breakthroughs, capturing millions of Soviet POWs and seizing vast territory, Baltic states, Belarus, Ukraine. Nonetheless, logistical issues, the Soviet policy of scorched earth, and the harsh climate began to slow German progress. Siege of Leningrad and the drive on Moscow. The Germans laid siege to Leningrad, St. Petersburg, in September 1941, intending to starve the city into submission. This siege lasted nearly 900 days and caused over 1 million civilian deaths. Meanwhile, the main army group center advanced toward Moscow. As they neared the Soviet capital, the onset of brutal winter, 1941-1942, and stout Soviet resistance, bolstered by Siberian divisions transferred from the Far East, forced the Germans to retreat from Moscow's outskirts. Barbarossa failed to deliver the quick knockout blow Hitler had envisioned. A two-front war for Germany, with the US not yet officially in the conflict, though indirectly aiding Britain through Lend-Lease. Germany was primarily engaged on the Eastern Front. However, the scope of Barbarossa and the growing Allied blockade required resources on multiple fronts. Hitler's strategic mistake of opening a war with the vast Soviet Union, while Britain remained undefeated, spelled long-term logistical strain. The war expands worldwide, late 1941. Japan's ambitions in Asia and the Pacific. In East Asia, Japan had occupied Manchuria, 1931, and invaded China, 1937. By 1940-1941, Japan sought further resources, oil, rubber, in Southeast Asia, putting it on a collision course with the US, Britain, and the Netherlands. Tensions grew as the US imposed embargoes on vital supplies like oil and steel. Pearl Harbor attack, December 7, 1941. On December 7, 1941, Japan launched a surprise attack on the US Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, crippling several battleships and killing over 2,000 Americans. This act drew the US fully into W2, leading President Franklin D. Roosevelt to declare war on Japan on December 8. Shortly afterward, Germany and Italy declared war on the US, globalizing the conflict further. Early Japanese conquests. In the months following Pearl Harbor, Japan seized territories including the Philippines, Malaya, Singapore, and the Dutch East Indies. This rapid expansion threatened British and American positions across the Pacific, creating a massive front stretching from the Eastern Front in Europe to the island battles in the Pacific. Turning points and major battles, 1942-1943. Midway, June 1942. The Battle of Midway was a critical naval clash in the Pacific. U.S. codebreakers anticipated Japan's move against Midway Atoll. The U.S. Navy sank 4 Japanese aircraft carriers while losing only 1. Midway reversed Japan's offensive momentum and gave the U.S. a strategic edge, paving the way for island hopping. El Alamein and the North African Theater, late 1942. In North Africa, the Second Battle of El Alamein, October-November 1942, saw General Bernard Montgomery's British Eighth Army defeat Rommel's forces. This, combined with the Allied landings in Morocco and Algeria, Operation Torch, November 1942, led to Axis capitulation in Tunisia by May 1943, removing the Axis presence from Africa. Stalingrad, August 1942, February 1943. Meanwhile, on the Eastern Front, Hitler aimed to capture Stalingrad for strategic and symbolic reasons. The Soviets fiercely defended the city, and in a massive counter-offensive, Operation Uranus, November 1942, they encircled the German Sixth Army. Starving and lacking supplies, the Sixth Army surrendered on February 2, 1943. This bitter defeat shattered the myth of Nazi invincibility and turned the tide in the East. Allied offensives and the gradual Axis retreat. 1943-1944. Sicily and the fall of Mussolini, mid-late 1943. With Axis forces expelled from North Africa, the Allies launched the invasion of Sicily in July 1943. As Allied troops advanced, the Italian public turned on Mussolini, and King Victor Emmanuel III had him arrested. Although Italy signed an armistice, September 1943, Germany swiftly occupied most of the peninsula, turning it into a prolonged battleground, Monte Cassino, Anzio, until 1945. The Eastern Front, Kursk and Soviet advances, summer 1943-1944. After Stalingrad, the Red Army gained confidence. In July-August 1943, the Soviets repelled Germany's last major eastern offensive at Kursk, the largest tank battle in history. From then on, the Wehrmacht was in strategic retreat. By mid-1944, Soviet forces recaptured Belarus, Ukraine, and the Baltics, advancing into Eastern Europe, Poland, the Balkans. Strategic bombing and civilian toll air raids grew in intensity, as U.S. and British bombers targeted German industry and cities day and night. Hamburg's firestorm, July 1943, caused tens of thousands of civilian deaths. The bombing of Dresden, February 1945, sparked controversy over targeting cultural centers. These bombings inflicted severe material damage, but also led to ethical debates about civilian losses. The liberation of Europe and fall of the Axis, 1944-1945. D-Day and the Western Front, the decisive Allied landing in Normandy, Operation Overlord, occurred on June 6, 1944. A massive amphibious invasion involving American, British, Canadian, and other Allied troops. Despite fierce German resistance on beaches such as Omaha, the Allies established a foothold and pushed through northern France, liberating Paris by late August. This opened the Western Front that Hitler had long feared. Soviet push into Central and Eastern Europe simultaneously. The Red Army launched operations like Bagration, summer 1944, devastating German Army Group Center and pushing the front far westward. They liberated much of Poland and approached the Reich's eastern borders. In August 1944, the Warsaw Uprising, led by the Polish Home Army, attempted to seize the city before Soviet arrival but was brutally suppressed by the Germans while the Soviets halted on the city's outskirts. Collapse of Nazi Germany. With Allied forces converging, Germany faced a two-front siege. The Battle of the Bulge, December 1944, January 1945, was Germany's last major offensive in the West, failing in the Ardennes region. In April 1945, the Soviets encircled Berlin, leading to Hitler's suicide on April 30th. Germany's unconditional surrender was signed on May 7, 1945, recognized in Europe as VE Day, Victory in Europe Day. The war in Europe ended, but conflict raged on in the Pacific. The Pacific Theater and the end of Wheatland hopping and the fight for the Pacific. After Midway, the Allies advanced with their island-hopping strategy, capturing key islands, Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, to isolate Japanese bases. U.S. Marines and Army forces faced fierce resistance. Casualties soared, and the Japanese used kamikaze tactics in desperation. The atomic bombings, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, August 1945. Fearing catastrophic losses in a direct invasion of the Japanese home islands, the United States decided to employ its secret weapon, the atomic bomb. On August 6, 1945, the first atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, killing an estimated 80,000 instantly. On August 9th, a second bomb devastated Nagasaki. This unprecedented destruction forced Japan's government to surrender. Japan's surrender, September 2, 1945. Following Emperor Hirohito's announcement of Japan's willingness to accept the Allies' terms on August 15th, the formal surrender ceremony took place on September 2, 1945, aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. Thus concluded World War II on a global scale. War's aftermath and a new world order. Human cost and destruction. World War II claimed an estimated 50 to 80 million lives, making it the deadliest conflict in human history. Thousands of towns and cities lay in ruins. Some, like Warsaw, were almost totally destroyed. The Holocaust and genocide against Jews, Roma, disabled individuals, and other groups demonstrated the extent of Nazi racial policy. Many survivors were displaced persons, left homeless and searching for families, dividing Europe, seeds of the Cold War. The post-war settlement, Germany was partitioned into occupation zones run by the US, UK, France, and the USSR. Eastern Europe fell under Soviet dominance. Communist regimes took hold in Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria. Soon, an ideological Iron Curtain divided the continent into Western democracies and the Communist Eastern Bloc. Tensions between the US-led West and the Soviet-led East escalated into the Cold War, lasting nearly half a century. Global institutions and decolonization. Determined to prevent future global wars, the Allies established the United Nations in 1945 for collective security and international cooperation. Economic frameworks like the Bretton Woods system, IMF, World Bank, aimed to stabilize world finance. The devastation in Europe encouraged movements toward integration, leading decades later to the European Union. Meanwhile, colonial empires weakened. Many territories in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East pushed for independence, reshaping the global political landscape. Technological and social legacies W2 spurred rapid technological innovation, from radar to jet engines, antibiotics, penicillin, and the atomic bomb. Women entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers, laying groundwork for post-war social changes. Racial integration in U.S. forces and controversies about Japanese-American internment catalyzed civil rights discussions. The world emerged from the war with advanced science, but faced an existential threat of nuclear annihilation in the coming Cold War era. A lesson for the ages. World War II demonstrated the catastrophic potential of unchecked aggression, totalitarian ideologies, and international failure to act against rising threats. The war inflicted unimaginable suffering across multiple continents, while alliances formed to defeat fascism later morphed into new rivalries, shaping the second half of the 20th century. Yet from the rubble emerged a determination to create global structures to preserve peace, champion human rights, and foster cooperation, though not without deep divisions and ongoing conflicts. This has been our extended look at World War II. If you found this video informative, please hit the like button, comment below with which aspects of the war you find most significant, and subscribe to our channel for more extensive historical explorations. Thank you for watching.